think I did it?
Well, what else can I think? You made that monster up out of thin air, and I don't try to tell me it's real. I'm not that stupid. Well, I am. I always believed in it.
But it's gotta be...
Hey gang, Uncle Todd and Sonny here, and it's our last trip to the beach with Roger Corman's surrealistic masterpiece, Creature from the Haunted Sea. This has a very convoluted history. Basically, this is the third in Corman's horror spoof trilogy. The first was Bucket of Blood, in which an aspiring artist accidentally kills a cat, covers it in clay, and is declared a genius. And now feeling he has to continue finding statues to make, he moves on to people. This was then reworked into Little Shop of Horrors with a similar plot, only this time it's a carnivorous plant. And then we have this, Creature from the Haunted Sea. It is actually a reworking of Corman's, well, his brother's previous film, but he produced it, Beast from the Haunted Cave, in which a group of bank robbers contend with a strange creature in a cave nearby the ski lodge cabin that they're hiding out in, up in the mountains. Here it's changed to the tropics of Puerto Rico. Now, one of the stars in this, who is listed as Edward Wayne, is actually Oscar-winning screenwriter for Chinatown, Robert Towne. Quite a coincidence. The story goes, Corman's producers were not going to give him any more funds for having a writer to do rewrites, which happens all the time on films, because they were going to Puerto Rico to film. So Corman told Towne he was now an actor, cast him in the lead, or one of the leads, and when he wasn't acting, he was doing rewrites. Funny enough, this film came in under budget, and Corman found he had enough to do another film, so he and Towne quickly knocked out a second script, told the producers they had already had it, and along with the stars Anthony Carbone and Betsy Jones Moorhead, they made The Last Woman on Earth, a more serious film than this one, about three people who survives a cataclysm and then has their time goes on and they're trying to rebuild some semblance of a life. The fact that there are two men and one woman starts to cause conflict between the group. And it's a pretty decent film. This one is different. Corman had said that he was tired of having these films where everybody kills the monster at the end, so he wanted to do one where the monster won. And so the basic plot here is a smuggler decides to double-cross his clients, blame it on a sea monster, only to have a sea monster actually show up. And if that was all it was, it'd be just another cheap, low-budget monster movie. But it's more than just a spoof. It is a weird movie. we'll get into that later. Um, Now, after the film had done its theatrical run and it got sold to TV, Corman brought back Town and some new actors to film some extra footage that could be edited in to get the film to proper TV length to play in a 2-hour slot. So it went from a 60-minute film to a 75-minute film. And if you have any thoughts about not knowing what kind of film this is, the opening pre-credit scene, one of the extra ones they filmed, will leave you no doubt what the tone of this film is. What? Oh, right. Thanks for reminding me. I was going to burn my nose off. You know how the sun gets. I had forgotten. A little messier than usual. Anyway, that is, of course, Sparks Moran, aka Agent XX-150. After the man who gave him the note is shot and he's chased, he reads the note, swallows it, and goes to meet his contact mentioned in the note at a little cantina, where they have a cryptic conversation that tells you nothing. Later, after the credits, we cut to Cuba, where Castro has completed his coup. The main officials of the former regime have grabbed the gold of the treasury and have hired... Oh, God, what is his name? Well, they've hired a smuggler. We'll get to the introductions in a minute. To get them out of the country and to a safe place. After everything's loaded aboard, Sparks, who is our narrator, explains who these master criminals are.
The big cheese was Renzo Capetto, alias Capo Rosetto, alias Rado Pizzetti, alias Zeppo Staccato, alias Shirley Lamour.
Yeah, this was made at a time when a joke about a man having a woman's name was considered hilarious. Next up, we have his, I guess you call it, mall.
Mary Monahan Bell, alias Bell Mary Monahan, alias Monahan Maribel. They say she was a gun moll just because Lucky Luciano gave her a Rolls Royce every Christmas.
Next up, we have Capetto's right-hand man.
The most of the Dark Quartet is Pete Peterson, Jr., son of Pete Peterson, Sr., famed vaudeville bird mimic. Pete Jr. inherited his father's talent for animal imitations, but unfortunately blew his brain out of whack while imitating a whooping crane at the Elks Convention picnic in Oshkosh in 1942.
And bringing up the end is a young member of the gang.
Happy Jack Monahan. So called because he developed a muscle spasm in his cheeks from watching too many Humphrey Bogart pictures.
Well, let's get down to brass tacks. Capetto has no intention of taking the Cubans to their destination. He plans to get rid of them and have the treasure all to him and his compatriots. Sparks is overhearing this, but he's not exactly a competent agent. and as such, doesn't hear a thing that he can understand. He's more interested in trying to romance Mary Bell.
Oh, now, what do you want?
You're too good for this life. You're young and you're innocent. You should get out. Well, look at it, you're good.
Are you unwell? The getting is great.
Taz is a little jealous. Spending too much time with Sonny. Anyway, Geppetto's plan is simple. He's going to kill one of the soldiers, blame it on a mythical sea monster based on a story a fisherman named Hemingway told him, in which he was fishing, the monster grabbed his line and pulled him for miles. Yeah, that's the plot of The Old Man in the Sea. And then this in turn will allow him to divert their course from where they were going to somewhere else. So that night, having sharpened up some gardening tools, gotten a plunger, and made up some green goo, Geppetto puts his plan into operation. Unfortunately for Geppetto, an actual monster also climbs aboard.
The monster invented by Renzo had already been invented by somebody else. By a couple of other monsters, I guess.
After Pete wakes everybody up by imitating the sound of a monster growling, and there's some slapstick because everybody trips all over each other. They find the body, but they also find one of their men is also missing. Geppetto chalks it up to Pete being overzealous and killing another soldier. Pete denies this, but he's not the most reliable of memories, so Geppetto just thinks he forgot. And the next morning, he talks to the general, and the general's number one says he's heard the legend of the sea monster and thinks they need to change course. The second in command of the Cuban soldiers is not buying it. He thinks the whole thing is hooey. There's no such thing as a monster. Well, unfortunately for him, the general has actually heard these stories and he believes them. So, they change course. And after a brief encounter with some of the new regime from Cuba, they come to an island. Oh, the brief encounter? It went something like this.
Good work, Pete.
As I said, Sparks is not the most competent of agents. Anyway, they come to a small island, and Geppetto accidentally runs his boat over the reef that's near it. Everybody scrambles out to get the gold onto a rowboat, and then this strange incident happens.
You know, this reminds me of one time on Lake Minnetonka. Louise Schmidt and I were paddling along when what do you think happened?
So, the gold is now down in the bottom of the water. Oh, also, one of the soldiers disappeared who had had been swimming towards shore. Wonder what pulled him under. Well, they built a shelter. Happy gets sent in one of the boats to San Juan to get diving equipment. And while out walking around, Pete finds his soulmate. Well, that man in the bushes, that's her husband. He may pop up again later. Meanwhile, Sparks has run into a bit of luck himself.
Hello, operator. Get me Havana, Cuba, 652314.
Kind of interesting. They just happen to have a phone out by a cliff on this somewhat kind of inhabited island. Anyway, Pete brings his new love, Rosina, to meet everyone. And then Happy returns with not only the diving equipment, but a lovely young woman named Carmelita, who really doesn't care for Jack, but she takes an immediate liking to Sparks.
Hello, who are you?
Carmelita Rodriguez.
Sparks Moran. As a trained espionage agent, I could tell that she was attracted to me. But I wanted Maribel.
A hitch comes in Capetto's plan. There happen to be some divers in the Cuban soldiers that are going to go down with them. So, Renzo decides to use the monster once more.
A lonely Cuban had found one of the many wrecks on the bottom. And Renzo had found the lonely Cuban.
After returning to shore, being unsuccessful in finding the dropped box, and blaming the missing diver on the monster, Happy finds out Carmelita's not interested in him, and he's dejected. That is, until Rosina introduces him to her lovely daughter, Mango. And we get some interesting conversation where it turns out she's a come-on for the tourists to bilk them out of money. But she says all this in Spanish, and Happy just kind of nods along and goes, "Oh, I feel the same way." Well, Mango, Happy, Pete, and Rosita decide to go swimming, and that turns out to not be a good idea. Meanwhile, Rosina's husband shows up and demands Capetto pay him $20 for the theft of his wife. And Capetto blows him off, and during a second dive, he finds the box and hides it without anyone seeing. Or so he thought. Well, once Capetto's returned to shore with the other Cubans, Happy accuses him of killing Mango, which he denies. But fortunately, Betty starting to doubt him. It is something he would have done. And now Geppetto's beginning to wonder if maybe there really is a monster. Meanwhile, the Cubans decide they're going to dive again with spear guns, and it doesn't go well. Well, at this point, the Cubans they're ready to leave the treasure and get the heck out of Dodge. Carmelita convinces Sparks that it's better to have someone that wants them as opposed to pining for someone who will never want them. And so they swipe a rowboat and head to the shore. And wouldn't you know it, at this point, the creature decides it's time to hit the buffet.
I love you till the day I die.
Renzo Mobster.
Well, with everybody eating, except for Carmelita and Sparks, Sparks plans to take Carmelita back to Washington with him and start a life together. And as for the monster, we get a nice little shot of him to close out the flick.
And guess who got the gold?
This, as I said before, this is a weird film. Very surreal. And there's like throwaway gags that have nothing to do with anything. When Sparks is on the phone to Cuba, a guy just comes up, just stands there and smiles at him through the whole conversation. And then smiles as he walks away. It's weird. And, well, then there's this that just makes no sense. You know, if this hadn't been made in 61 and had been made in, say, 67 or 68, this would have been considered a psychedelic masterpiece because there's stuff like that all through it. There's slapstick, puns, bizarre names. It's just a crazy film. I lost my train of thought here. It's like the name of the second in command, Colonel Cabeza Grande, Big Head. And the title sequence was animated by none other than Sergio Aragonés, who became a very popular artist at Mad Magazine. There's even a scene that you would think was an intended spoof of His Kind of Woman, where in that film, Vincent Price and a group of Mexican soldiers all climb into a boat. It goes out and sinks. And in this one, all the Cuban officers get in a boat. They all salute as the boat sinks. That was actually an accident, but Corman decided to keep it in because, well, it is pretty funny. Other jokes include Sparks disguising his radio as a lunch with pickles, holding tubes and other things, only to end up having to eat it all because Pete comes over and sees him and asks if he can have some, and they sit there eating the tubes. Yeah. Acting-wise, well, Robert Towne is not a trained actor, but in this film, I don't think it really mattered. His stilted dialogue just kind of blends in with all the other craziness. I do like Anthony Carbone doing sort of a Humphrey Bogart thing. It's more physical than actually trying to do the voice. You know, he's got the look of the hat and the cigarette, kind of like from Key Largo. That's kind of amusing. And Beach Dickerson as Pete is just hilarious. He doesn't actually do any real animal noises. If you saw in some of the clips, they're just dubbed in, but he is a lovable idiot in this, where he gets his orders and then is given a lollipop as a reward. Yeah, this is one crazy film, and for some reason it's not as well received or loved as Little Shop of Horrors. And I think it's because it's just a little too odd. Corman once said in an interview he thought, because how weird the film is, it would either make a lot of money or it would make no money. And it made a little money. And he's never been able to figure that one out. But yeah, it's a fun little film. I would recommend checking it out. But if you're not inclined for that kind of absurdity, that's up to you. Please hit like, share, and subscribe, and stay after the credits for my favorite scene.
Right. Which way do I turn this Dakota pin?
Left.
Left?
Right.
Right.